July 1943. A smoky, dimly lit briefing room in Algiers, North Africa. The air was thick with the smell of stale tobacco, gin, a suffocating sense of aristocratic superiority. Just weeks before the invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky, the Allied High Command was finalizing battle plans. On one side of the massive oak table sat General Sir Harold Alexander and his staff of high-ranking British officers. On the other sat General Bernard Montgomery, the celebrated hero of El Alamein, wearing his trademark black beret and an expression of smug confidence. In the corner of the room, a group of British brigadiers were having a conversation just loud enough to carry across the floor. Their eyes kept drifting toward the American liaison officers who were quietly reviewing map overlays. "The Americans are decent lads," one British brigadier remarked, his voice dripping with condescension. "But they're simply not ready for a peer competitor, panicked at Kasserine Pass. They lack the spine, the discipline, and the combat grit for a real European campaign. They are untested colonials trying to play a gentleman's game." Another officer laughed, swirling his drink. "Quite right. They have all the equipment in the world, but none of the military tradition. The best role for Patton's 7th Army is a passive one. Them protect Montgomery's left flank. We'll handle the actual fighting, and we'll take Messina. It's better to keep the amateurs out of the way of the professionals." The American officers in the room went rigid, their faces burning with a quiet, pressed rage. One of them, a battle-hardened colonel, gripped his pencil so tightly it snapped in half. He started to stand up, ready to settle the matter right there on the briefing room floor. But his hand was caught by a senior commander who shook his head. "Don't waste your fists here, Colonel," the commander whispered. "Save it, because General Patton is arriving at headquarters in less than an hour, and when he hears what these bastards are saying about his men, there won't be a shelter in North Africa safe from the storm." Before we continue, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We tell the World War II stories that show what happened when pride met reality. These are the forgotten moments where the rigid rules of war collided with the harsh realities of human nature. The arrogant British commanders believed the Americans were soft, inexperienced, and militarily inferior. They viewed General Bernard Montgomery as the undisputed master of modern warfare, a methodical genius who would easily conquer Sicily while the Americans watched from the sidelines. But they had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They forgot that the commander of the U.S. 7th Army was General George S. Patton, Jr., a man who lived for combat, who had exactly zero patience for European snobbery, and who was about to turn their cautious, aristocratic military traditions into a relic of the past. The report of the British officer's insults reached Patton within the hour. He listened to his liaison officer recount every single word in complete, deadly silence. Patton didn't yell. He didn't pace. He sat behind his desk, his fingers drumming a slow, rhythmic pattern against the wood. His eyes, cold and unblinking, stared at the map of Sicily. His staff knew this silence. It was the absolute calm before a devastating storm. When the officer finished, Patton slowly stood up. His 4-star helmet caught the dim light, and his ivory-handled revolvers rested securely in their holsters. A thin, menacing smile appeared on his lips. The smile of a commander who had just been handed the perfect opportunity to destroy his rivals. "So, they think we're amateurs?" Patton said, his voice quiet but sharp as a razor. "They think the 7th Army is only good for guarding Montgomery's left flank, while his 8th Army takes all the glory in Messina? Patton, he slammed his fist onto the map of Sicily, directly over the city of Palermo. Alexander's plan relegates us to second fiddle. He wants us to walk behind Montgomery, clearing his roads and acting as his shield. Well, I'll protect Montgomery's flank. All right, protect it by conquering the western half of the entire damn island before he even reaches his first major objective. We are going to Palermo. Chief of Staff, General Hobart Gay, looked at him in shock. General, Alexander's orders are very specific. We are restricted to a defensive boundary. Bypassing those orders to drive on Palermo could create a massive rift with the British High Command. Could get you relieved of command. I don't give a damn about Alexander's boundaries, Patton roared, his voice booming through the office. And I don't give a damn about their gentlemanly agreements. Montgomery is slow. He is methodical. He won't move a single tank until he has a 3-to-1 numerical advantage, complete air supremacy, and has planned the proper aristocratic approach. He fights like he's conducting a classical symphony. We are going to fight like a lightning bolt. We are going to show these arrogant bastards what American combat grit actually looks like. Patton turned to his commanders, eyes blazing with determination. We land on July 10th. From the moment our boots hit the sand, we do not stop. We do not consolidate. We do not wait for permission. We attack. We bypass their boundaries. We take Palermo, and then we race them to Messina. If they want a race, we'll give them one and they will never forget. On July 10, 1943, the Allied invasion of Sicily began. Almost immediately, stark difference between the two military cultures became painfully obvious. General Montgomery's British Eighth Army landed on the eastern coast, facing the direct route to Messina along the foothills of Mount Etna. True to his reputation, Montgomery's advance was slow, cautious, and incredibly methodical. At the first sign of German resistance near Catania, Montgomery stopped. He halted his entire army to consolidate, bring up more heavy artillery, and to prepare a massive, coordinated set-piece battle. He refused to bypass the German defenses, choosing instead to wait for overwhelming supplies. While Montgomery's army was having their proverbial tea and crumpets in the shadow of Mount Etna, Patton's Seventh Army was unleashing absolute chaos on the western flank. Patton's men, the very soldiers the British had dismissed as green and untested, fought with a savage, unrelenting tempo. They landed under heavy Italian artillery fire, secured their beachheads, and immediately began driving inland. Alexander, realizing that Patton was moving too fast, sent a frantic radio message ordering the Americans to halt and remain in their defensive positions. Patton took the message, looked at his staff, and said, "Tell the messenger the radio connection was garbled." I didn't hear a word. Instead of halting, Patton cut his units loose. He ordered the 3rd Infantry Division and the 2nd Armored Division to drive northwest toward Palermo. The speed of the American advance was staggering. The infantrymen, marching through the scorching Sicilian heat, covered up to 30 miles a day over rugged, mountainous terrain, carrying full combat gear. They climbed steep cliffs, cleared Italian strongpoints with raw aggression, and bypassed main roads to flank the enemy. On July 22nd, just 12 days after landing, Patton's tanks rolled into the major port city of Palermo. The western half of the island had been conquered in record time. The amateur American soldiers had captured over 50,000 Italian prisoners, cured vital supply ports, and shattered the entire Italian defensive line, while Montgomery was still bogged down, unable to bypass the German resistance at Catania. When the news of Palermo reached the British High Command in Algiers, the room went absolutely silent. The comfortable assumptions of American military inferiority had been shattered in a single, lightning-fast maneuver. Patton was just getting started. He turned his eyes east toward the ultimate prize. Messina, race to Messina, was now a matter of absolute personal and national honor. Messina was the exit point for the German army escaping to the Italian mainland. Whoever reached it first would claim the ultimate victory of the campaign. General Alexander, realizing the British Eighth Army was failing to make progress, finally gave Patton permission to drive east along the northern coast. He made it clear. He expected Montgomery's veteran forces to reach the city first. Patton gathered his commanders. British think they're going to walk into Messina and take the credit for this campaign, Patton told them, his voice low and dangerous. They've been mocking our soldiers, calling them soft. I want you to drive your men until the tanks run on blood. We are going to beat Montgomery to Messina if it's the last thing we do. The northern coastal road to Messina was a tactical nightmare. It was a narrow single-lane highway carved into the sheer cliffs of the Mediterranean, heavily defended by elite German paratroopers. Germans blew up every bridge, destroyed every tunnel, and mined every single inch of the road as they retreated. Any conventional military commander would have stopped. They would have waited for engineers to rebuild the bridges. But Patton refused to stop. When his advance was halted by a blown bridge at Brolo, Patton didn't wait. He ordered the 3rd Infantry Division to execute a daring midnight amphibious landing behind the German lines, bypassing the bridge entirely and catching the retreating Germans completely by surprise. When his generals complained that their men were reaching their absolute physical limits, Patton snapped. I don't care about their fatigue. The Germans are more tired than we are. Keep moving. Montgomery, realizing the inexperienced little brother was closing in on the prize, tried to speed up his own advance, but his heavy, methodical logistic structure simply couldn't adapt to the changing battlefield. The British Eighth Army remained bogged down in the heavy German defenses along the coast. On the morning of August 17, 1943, final payoff of the campaign occurred. A platoon of Patton's 3rd Infantry Division reached the outskirts of Messina. They walked into the city square, the streets quiet and ruined by artillery. Just 2 hours later, the advance guard of the British Eighth Army, a prestigious armored unit chosen personally by Montgomery, finally rolled into the city. They expected to find a defeated town waiting for their triumphant entry. Instead, they were met with a sight that destroyed their aristocratic pride. Sitting on the hoods of their dusty, grease-stained jeeps in the center of the town square were American soldiers. They were dirty, their uniforms were torn, and they were casually smoking cigarettes. Standing in the center of the square was General George S. Patton, his ivory-handled pistols catching the bright Sicilian sun, waiting to receive them. Patton stepped forward, a broad, triumphant smile on his face, greeted the stunned British officers with a crisp salute. "Welcome to Messina, gentlemen," Patton said, his voice dripping with polite, devastating irony. "We've been waiting for you. I hope your journey was comfortable." The race to Messina was a small campaign in a massive world war, but its psychological impact was monumental. In just 38 days, Patton's amateur 7th Army had conquered the western half of Sicily, driven over 200 miles through mountainous terrain, captured over 100,000 prisoners, and beat the most celebrated army in the British Empire to the campaign's ultimate objective. The stinging condescension of the British High Command was silenced permanently. General Bernard Montgomery, defeated but trying to maintain his dignity, had to write a formal letter to Patton, acknowledging the exceptional capability and speed of the American soldier. General Harold Alexander, who had spent the entire campaign trying to restrict Patton's movement, had to admit in his official reports to Winston Churchill that the operational tempo and combat grit of the United States Seventh Army had been the decisive factor in the quick liberation of the island. Years after the war, a senior British officer who had been present at that initial, arrogant briefing in Algiers wrote in his memoirs about the lesson Patton had delivered. "We looked at the Americans through the lens of our own centuries-old traditions," he wrote. "We mistook their lack of aristocratic formality for a lack of fighting spirit. Patton showed us, in the mountains of Sicily, modern war is won through speed, innovation, and an unrelenting will to conquer. The Americans did not need our tradition. They had something better. They had results." Eisenhower, when reviewing the campaign's dramatic conclusion, reportedly smiled at Patton's aggressive defiance of Alexander's orders. He remarked to his staff that while Patton was a diplomatic nightmare, he was the only commander who knew how to turn a battlefield into a demonstration of absolute, undeniable American excellence. He had proved to the world and to his own allies that the American soldier was second to none. He had shattered the myth of colonial inferiority under his boot and established a new standard of modern, decisive warfare. Because, in the business of total war, the only tradition that matters is the tradition of winning anyway. If you had been in Patton's position, would you have bypassed Allied orders to conquer Palermo and Messina? Or would you have followed General Alexander's cautious instructions? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more stories about the moments when pride met consequences, make sure to subscribe, because history isn't just about dates and battles. It's about the choices men made when the pressure was on, and the men who delivered when it mattered most.